Hello, I'm Gwen Hill from Pine Ridge Baptist Church Sunday School Department, Ladies Class. We're studying the book of Daniel. Uh, Thank you for joining us. Hope you enjoy the study. We are starting in chapter 3 today. We have just found out that Daniel was a prisoner of war. He was somewhere between the ages of 15 and 20. So I told my Sunday school class, we're going to call him 17 years old. How about that? And he was taken from his homeland, from his parents, from his religion, from his temple, from his city, from his nation, captive into Babylon. Because he is either of nobility or royalty in his lineage, he is a smart young man, comely, easy to one of the leaders of his group, of his peer group. He was chosen out by Nebuchadnezzar's men to be a good candidate to become a leader in Babylon. If they could make this young Hebrew man into a young Babylonian man, they will spend 3 years to brainwash this young man so that he forgets his past. But as you get to know Daniel and 3 of his prayer partners, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, you'll find out these 3 were not so easily brainwashed. We saw in chapter 1 their captivity, where they came into Babylon, where they had found favor with their captors to allow them to obey their God's commands about dietary laws, and what became of that. And then in chapter 2, how Daniel was the only one who could interpret the king's dream. And now in chapter 3, we don't hear about Daniel, but we hear about his 3 companions. Where is Daniel in chapter 3? Nobody really knows, but because of his stature and where he's at and the training that he has received, he's off doing king's business somewhere else. So in chapter 3, let's begin. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, the height of which was 60 cubits, its width was 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Okay. The king made an image of gold. In chapter 2, he had a dream where only the head was of gold, and that head was a replica of him. Daniel, when he told him the meaning of it, told him how powerful he was, how God had set him up, and that he was, while his reign would not last forever, it would be a golden time in the annals of history. And now we see him building an image of gold, 90 foot tall and 9 foot wide. And it's all of gold. Okay, picture it, if you will. It kind of, the way it's described, kind of like the Washington Monument, shaped kind of like that. But it's all gold. On the plains of Dura. Plains means level ground. Where they were at, there's a whole lot of sand. So picture that rising up out of the sand 90 feet. And it is probably not solid gold, but clad with gold. And what an impressive sight that would have been. It would have reflected the desert sun. It would have been magnificent to look at. It would strain your eyes, but it would have been there. Verse 2, then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent word to assemble the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, all of the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Never fear that this is something very political. This is something very political. It is the people that he has ordered to come together are all of the political leaders in the land, leaders that he has set up. He is well renowned. Nebuchadnezzar is well renowned for putting up opportunities for the people that he has entrusted power to display their allegiance to him. And this is another one. And he's telling them all to come. They expect that. They expect to have to pay allegiance to Nebuchadnezzar, to the image he set up, meaning to him. Then in verse 4, then the herald loudly proclaimed, to you the command is given, O peoples, nations, and men of every language, that the moment you shall hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the lyre, the trigon, the psaltery, the bagpipe, and all kinds of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king has set up. So he has a herald announce what's going to happen. He's going to tell the program of the day. Now I want you to picture this. They would have set up a temporary dais for the throne to be set upon, for Nebuchadnezzar to sit there. He would have had the men the closest around him backing him up. He would have had some of the army there as protection against if the crowd should turn, or if someone should have the temerity to challenge him at all there. You would have this statue, this 90-foot statue. You would think it was probably inside of that statue was wooden and brick, more than likely. We're not told. But looking at other things that they've built during that time, that's probably what it was. There was probably a kiln very close by, a furnace, if you would, where they fired the brick. And then there would be a sea of people. There would be a lot of people around. People that he has conquered their peoples in war. People that are leaders. He wants all the leaders there, all the providences. If you can imagine maybe the president saying he wanted all the governors there, all the lieutenant governors there. He would want all of the leaders of all the big corporations there. He would want representatives from every influential segment of his society there. That's who Nebuchadnezzar wants in front of that statue. And then the herald, he mentions all of the instruments in the orchestra. Now we're going to see him mention these 3 different times, and that has bothered me, I'll be honest with you. Anytime the Lord says something twice, pay attention, because he's serious. There's several times in Scripture where Jesus says, verily, verily. Well, you very well better read that, because he means it's important, because he's stressing it when he says verily, verily, twice. But here they're mentioned 3 times. And most of the commentators I read didn't say a word about why 3 times. We're told, now when these instruments play, you are to do this. And then we are told the instruments play and what they did. And then there's another time that they're listed because the 3 young men do not bow. I'm telling ahead of my story. But they're mentioned 3 times, and I wondered why. Why the importance and the emphasis on these. And I'm not sure that I've got it all that God intended. In fact, I am sure I do not. But I'm thinking that music has power. Music has great power. Music moves us in not only emotionally, music can move us. It can soothe us. It can rile us. It can have us. You can guide people to have different psychological thoughts with the music. You don't believe me? Think of Jaws and the da 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 da. See how it heightened anxiety when you watch that movie about the shark. That heightened you. Well, he's been very controlling. And in their day and time, music also represented the social class that you were in. If you'll think about the recorders that the children play when they're young, it's like a flute, their little recorder. That's something that's very cheap, readily attainable, and all kids could have it. But as you get a little bit older, as you get a little bit more affluent, then they were having instruments that were more expensive, that denoted more ability and more social status. So maybe that had part of this to do with it. But I think partly it has to do with how music can help guide people. So the herald at that time, he mentions all of the different sounds, all the different music, and then he throws in the statement, you are to fall down. When you hear that music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king has set up. Do you wonder where this statue came from? Well, it came from Nebuchadnezzar. It is very important that you pay attention to the author of this. Back in chapter 2, we read that his kingdom would be like the head of the statue. Not permanent, not everlasting, but for a time. Well, Nebuchadnezzar is coming off of the battlefield about this time. And what he has done is his old nemesis from years of battle has been Egypt. And he's conquered Egypt this year. And as he came through the land, he passed through Jerusalem. And he probably, had the people not resisted, just raided them and gone on. But the people, the Jewish people, the Hebrew children, resisted him. And they resisted him to their detriment. He besieged them when they didn't bow down to him. He besieged them. He burned Jerusalem. He burned the temple. He looted the temple and he burned the temple. So, in his culture, we talked about in chapter 2, you have two people going to battle, and the one that won, that means your God is stronger. Okay? So in chapter 2, he really acknowledged how strong Daniel's God was. But when he was victor over Jerusalem, that meant to him, coming off a battle from Egypt and now winning over Jerusalem, that meant his God, in his mind, his God was stronger than Jehovah God of the Hebrew children. He was on a real high. So instead of a head, he has a whole statue of gold. You're wrong, Jehovah God. My kingdom will last forever. So, it's important to know who you're bowing before, isn't it? He said, the herald goes on and he said, but whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into the midst of the furnace of the blazing fire. That kiln is a witness over there. It would have been burning mightily, and they could see the flames through the open doors or vent holes of that furnace. That's a good detriment. None of us like to be burned. And therefore, at that time, when all the people hear the sound, this is the second time, all the peoples heard the sound of the horn, the flute, the lyre, the trigon, the psaltery, the bagpipe, and all kinds of music. All the peoples, nations, and men of every language fell down and worshiped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. The herald says, when you hear it, you better bow down. And now they heard it, and they bowed down. Immediately. When the orchestra began, the first strands, down they went. Verse 8. For this reason at that time certain Chaldeans came forward and brought charges against the Jews. Who were the Chaldeans? The Chaldeans were the counselors who were in charge before Daniel interpreted the dream in chapter 2. Then Daniel was put over the top of them, and they've hated him ever since. If they didn't hate him before, they certainly hated him then. And it bled over to his friends, his prayer partners, his Jewish brethren. And so they were looking for any way at all to discredit them, and they thought they found it. They brought word or charges against these young men. And this is what they responded to Nebuchadnezzar the king. O king, live forever. This was kind of like you and I say, good afternoon, how are you? This is a greeting. You, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound of the horn, the flute, the lyre, the trigon, the psaltery, and the bagpipe, and all kinds of music is to fall down and worship the golden image. They're repeating back to him what the herald had said to them. This, again, brings up the musical instruments again. And they're saying, we want to remind you what you said. That's very brave of them. Very brave of them. I don't think Nebuchadnezzar's line of vision had initially shown him or he had noticed the three young men who didn't bow down. But these Chaldeans are going to draw his attention to that. You, O king, have made a decree to worship the golden image. And you've continued and you said, but whosoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the midst of the furnace of the blazing fire. I can see Nebuchadnezzar thinking, and where is this going? And where is this going? Parroting back to me what the herald said. Where is this going? And then the Chaldeans continued in verse 12. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the administration of the province of Babylon, namely Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have disregarded you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image which you have set up. You made the rules, and we're going to point out to you three men who did not obey them. What are you going to do, king? What are you going to do? Can you see them rubbing their hands together and think, we've got them now? They intentionally, on purpose and in front of God and everybody, refused to bow down. They know their king. They know their king. In verse 13, then Nebuchadnezzar, in a rage and anger, gave orders to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that these men were brought before the king. I want you to notice he's in a rage, and he orders some of his soldiers to go get these men and bring them before him. I don't think those men walked up and bowed down to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and said, would you guys please follow us up here? King Nebuchadnezzar wants to see you. I don't think that's what they did. It says they were brought before the king. I think they were probably roughly handled because the king is angry. And I don't want him to be angry with me, so I'm going to treat these men as if they have done something horrible. And in Nebuchadnezzar's eyes, they did. They disrespected him. They didn't follow his rules, as he said. After all, he's the most powerful man on the earth at that time. In verse 14, Nebuchadnezzar responded, and he said to them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image which I have set up? Am I to believe that you would disrespect me so that you would disregard my order, my stated wishes? You have served me well, but now you rebel, and now you show your disloyalty. And if there's one thing that Nebuchadnezzar couldn't handle, it was disloyalty. Verse 15. Nebuchadnezzar does something here that is unexpected, and I bet you the Chaldeans didn't expect him to do it either. In verse 15, now if you are ready, at the moment you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the lyre, the trigon, the psaltery, the bagpipe, and all kinds of music, if you're ready to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well, very well then. But if you do not worship, you will immediately be cast into the midst of the furnace of fire, blazing fire. And what God is there that can deliver you out of my hands? So what he's doing is he's giving them a second chance. Maybe from the time that his anger told his guard to go get them and bring them forward to him, and the time it took for the guard to drag the three of them up on the dais with him, he's remembered, these are friends of Daniel. They have served me well. This is about 20 years after chapter 2. These men have served me well. I really don't want to lose them. So he's given them another chance. This is not something that he is renowned for doing, giving second chances. But he is. And again, they give the names of the instruments. I would love to know. And one day in heaven, I think if I can remember it, I'm going to ask the Lord, can I have a few minutes with Daniel and let him tell me what the importance of those instruments being listed so often really meant? He says, remember, boys, if you don't obey my edict, if you don't do what I'm telling you to do, if you don't submit to me, if you don't worship me, that fire right over there, you're going to be the kindling. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to give you an answer concerning this matter. We don't need to explain ourselves. For 20-something years we've worked for you. You know the God that we worship, and we don't have to explain. We don't have to explain. Sometimes a simple yes or a simple no is all that's required. And these three young men, I want you to remember these men. This statue was not erected overnight. The plans were drawn up. The materials were gathered together. These three men, because they are over the providence, they were well aware of the building of this statue. They were well aware that it was going to be clad in gold. They have read, I started to say invitation. It wasn't an invitation, a decree that they come to the dedication. They had to have foreseen the opportunity that Nebuchadnezzar could use this in just exactly the way it is. Can you in your mind's eye see them getting together the night before and saying, what if we're asked to do this? What is going to be our response? Can you see them praying for strength? Can you see them praying for guidance? Can you see them comforting one another. This was not something that happened on the fly. These men got up and dressed that morning and walked or rode out to the plain where this statue is located, found a place to stand together. They knew exactly what was a danger of happening. And here they are, looking at a very angry, all-powerful king. And listen to what they said. In verse 17, I also wonder which one's speaking. Or if one would speak and then another to get the whole message. But they're replying to Nebuchadnezzar and they say, if it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the furnace of the blazing fire, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. Our God is able to deliver us out of your hand. Our God has proved himself to us, and we trust him with our lives. But you know, king, listen to verse 18. But even if he does not, let it be known to you, O king, that we are not going to serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. Our God is capable of saving us, but even if he doesn't, we're still not going to worship the statue or you. We know the consequences, but you are not our God. Jehovah God is our God. And if he chooses, he can save us. But even if he doesn't, what a wonderful testimony. You and I get into trouble and we pray to God for help a lot of times, and we're so quick to want it on our terms and during our time. I have to remind myself all the time that my time is not necessarily God's time. He's not on my timetable. I'm on his. He's not in my plan. I'm in his. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, how strong they were. You know, they are so special, these four men and their faith, and such an example for us, how to live our lives, how to be strong enough and faithful enough. I'm going to leave you hanging right there. I know if you've been in Sunday school very long, you know the ending of the story, but I want you to think about it a little bit. As these men are facing life and death, and they trust their God enough to know, if I go to the furnace, you'll save me, Lord. You'll take me straight to you. And if you don't save me from the furnace, Lord, so be it. I trust your will. I trust you. Whatever happens, you gave me my life. I can give it back to you. I refuse to break the commandments, to worship another God, to worship another graven image. I refuse that, Lord. I hold tight to you. You are my God. We are struggling every day in our lives. Be careful what you put in front of you to take God's place. And remember the example of these three young men standing in front of the all-powerful, mighty king of the time that they were in, most powerful man on earth, and defying him because he was asking them to do something that they knew was be a displeasure to their God. Have a wonderful week and bless God.